Good afternoon. Welcome. My name is Eric Patterson. I serve as President and CEO of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation and Museum here in Washington, D.C. And I'm delighted that you could join us for this important commemoration of the events of 1949 as citizens of Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia were forcibly removed from their homes. I'm not going to tell that story today. We'll hear that in just a few minutes from our distinguished guests. But let me start by saying that our mission at the Victims of Communism Foundation is to educate future generations about the crimes, about the terrible history, the terrible ideas, the evil legacy of communism, and today to be an advocate for those still held captive by totalitarian regimes around the world. We do that really with three different lines of effort. One of them is this beautiful museum. And if you haven't been here in the past, I welcome you to stay this afternoon and see the exhibits. And you'll see right downstairs exhibits across from the Baltics, photos of champions of liberty from Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania, all right here in the museum. Our second line of effort is policy-relevant research. You may not realize, for instance, that we have the leading research team in the world documenting the mistreatment of Uyghurs in China. In fact, last fall, our reports on that situation resulted in Volkswagen and BASF pulling out of factories that they owned in Xinjiang province. So we're committed to the ideal not just of telling the story of the past, but being champions for human rights today. And then, of course, our third and our largest set of activities have to do with education. And you've seen some things on the screen earlier, such as our high school curriculum, which actually has a case study of the deportations of the 1940s in the Baltics. So we train thousands of students, we train thousands of teachers every year through online and face-to-face instruction here at the museum and across the United States. That's what we do. Well, I've thought a lot about this topic in recent days, in part because I visited Ukraine in December of 2024. And I met with families who were telling me about the children, the 20,000 plus documented individual boys and girls who've been stolen by the Russian regime. And it made me very sensitive to the fact of what it would be like for people to knock on your door in the middle of the night and to take away part of your family and then involuntarily exile them to a work camp, to a mining camp, to a logging camp, or maybe just to certain death in a faraway place. That's the story, unfortunately, that's happening in Europe today. And the story that we're going to hear about today is one where 100,000 people in the 1940s were taken from their homes in the Baltic states. By the way, when we talk about this with students, we try to give them a sense of perspective. If that were to happen to the United States today, we'd be talking about 6 million boys and girls, men and women, taken from our country, taken to far north Canada and forced to work in austere conditions, perhaps. 6 million. And of course, in 1949, 75% of them were underage. They were children, or they were women, or they were the elderly. So a decimating event. And when you think about it in the scale of a population, then you have to think about the trauma to families, the grief. But there's also another side to the story, which we'll hear about, I think, a little bit today. And that's a story of the vindication of the Baltic peoples, of their struggle for liberty, of what they overcame, and which allows us to remember the truth today. Well, I'm delighted that we have 3 foreign ministers with us today. And you'll notice that one chair is still empty. That was planned. There's a CNN interview going on in another room just down the hall, but we plan to get started, and then that individual will join us. So let me introduce our 3 ministers today. You see their photos right here. First coming, His Excellency, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Estonia, Margus Tsahkna. And then also coming forward, and we'll go ahead and seat them all at this point in time, Kęstutis Budrys, His Excellency is the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Lithuania. Gentlemen, let me say one last word about our plan for today. We're going to hear from each of our 3 guests, and then I'll come back and moderate a Q&A session. When we get to that point, I just ask that you identify yourself and your organization, and then ask a very brief question. Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. Thank you, everyone who has been putting lots of effort into really show the story about evil about evil in the world that communism has created. And today as well, 76 years ago, there was a deportation for the Baltic states, and as it was mentioned, 70% of these tens of thousands of people, they were just children and elderly people, disabled people, and it was nothing connected to any kind of like military reasons. It was just this kind of atrocities what this kind of regime is able to do. And unfortunately, we have the same situations not only in Ukraine but many other places in the world. So in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, we have family stories. There is no single family who has not touched by this kind of atrocities, who has not lost any of the family members of the sisters or sons or daughters. But the case is that we can live with that because we know the price about freedom. We know how it is to live without freedom. And that's why we are unconditionally supporting Ukraine. We are unconditionally fighting against these kind of regimes who are making these atrocities like a daily life. You mentioned more than 20,000 kids deported from Ukraine. I think that globally people don't know that. These children are still there. We know by name more than 22,000 kids, and we're working heavily to get them back. And these children were not deported only during the last 3 years. There are stories then the children were deported already after 2014 invasion, and many of them they have sent against their own nation, their own families to fight on the battlefield. So these are the stories from the 21st century. So this is very important that we understand. We need to fight against evil. We need to understand that it can come back. And that's why we are putting lots of effort in as a free Baltic states as well, to be ready to fight for our freedom. And we decided in the beginning of 90s that we will never be alone again. And it's a good thing that we just had three of us the meeting with Secretary Rubio, and we can say very clearly that we see the US people's commitment on this kind of cooperation and also standing for the values that anything what we see here in this museum cannot happen again. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
It's me or you? It's great to be back in Washington, and all of us have been here in the last 2 months before, and this is my fourth visit in the last 2 months, and that just signifies the importance of the transatlantic relationship. And why? Because out of 107 years of our country's foundation in 1918, US has been with us from the first day. And also when the Soviet Union illegally occupied us, it was the US which implemented its non-recognition policy of Soviet occupation. It lasted 50 years. And today we commemorate those deportations. It was a conscious policy of elimination of political, military and other elites, economic elites. We see that happening, as you said, Margus, also today in Ukraine, in the occupied areas. So the playbook has not changed so much. But in the same time, it was the US which sustained our freedom, which sustained the ability of our embassies to function in the DC. So that non-recognition policy was a basis of regaining our democracy and the strong democratic institutions. So the fact now today is that we are flourishing democracies, strong institutionally, strong economically, strong militarily, that we have this perfect alliedship with the US, as Secretary Rubio said today, is very much something that US prizes and needs to really take credit for it. It's also the credit to the Latvians, Estonians and Lithuanians, because despite all that sufferings that we went through, we clearly had that light of freedom in our minds, hearts and the future. So we survived. We survived through that ideal that was supported by the US. And that is something that we always also tell our Ukrainian friends. Yes, it's hardship. You are fighting for the existence of your nation, not only the country, the nation. And your strength will be that light of freedom for the future. That's why we are supporting you. That's why you are fighting. You are stronger through it. It's hard. It's horrible what we are seeing, but we will be better off, all of us. And that's why we support the peace efforts. That's why we support those elements in the negotiations that can bring this lasting peace in Ukraine, because Ukraine as a nation is stronger than ever. And through the Baltic states' knowledge, through our hard experience, we know that it works. It actually brought us back to where we belong.
Thank you. Thank you for invitation to be here. That's my first time in the museum, and it's the very impressive and touching exhibition that I already seen, and it's a very needed job to do because our mission is not finished yet. It's not the historical episodes only, that's the reality that 1.5 billion of population in the world still lives under the communism. And we are the living example of the country that suffered occupation with the communism, and they had the very strong then political support for us to resist and then to regain independence. And we are here to tell to the others and also to encourage Ukrainians to do the same, because we see how communism now transforms into Russism, at least in Russia, and continues its evil practices. More than 130,000 of Lithuanian citizens were deported during 35 deportations. And as Margus already mentioned, you would hardly find the family in Lithuania or elsewhere that was not part of it, not part of the repressions from the regime, be it KGB and KVD inside the country, or be it repressions, or be it deportations. My grandparents were farmers, and all their property was confiscated just after the occupation, and they were deported to Siberia. My grandparents were teachers, and my grandfather was principal in the primary school. Naturally, they were intellectuals and they were the enemies of the regime. That's why they were deported. And they were allowed to bring only one bag with them. And they were young people, they were just married without children. My mother was born in Siberia after the deportation. So they thought what to bring with them. And they took one bag of books and with them and to Siberia. And after the years, they were laughing at themselves that was the most unpractical decision when you are deported, because they didn't know what awaits them, and because they were just taken away from their home. And confiscations was so normal practice then, that you are just leaving the home, losing everything that you have. And after returning back from Siberia, then it was my mom and her sister, they were not allowed to teach anymore, and they were not allowed to be part of the social life, normal, because they were still treated as the enemies. As my mother during the communist years, she was also struggling with being untrusted part of the system, and seeing all this being repeated with deportations and with the children, that is the crime against humanity that Lithuania support the case against Russia and Belarus in assisting that. You see that it's not for the history, and we still need the guarantees, and we still need the instruments to stop it, to prevent it, and not to be repeated. And I think that one of the reasons why it's still happening is because there was no international accountability for the ideology, for the regime. There was the Nuremberg process for Nazism, and Nazis were prosecuted, and it was concluded that Nazism was an evil. That was not the case with communism, because communistic practices we witnessed were the same. We need this, because if it will be left without accountability, even this time, it will repeat again and again tomorrow. And we want to, and we are contributing to avoid that. And there was another element really important in our resistance. That was the U.S. non-recognition policy, and that was the Sumner-Wells Declaration of 1940, July, which said that forceful annexation will not be accepted by U.S. and won't be recognized. And that's why we need to support Ukraine with also the political support and non-recognition of any forced annexations, and be it Crimea or be it the current territories. Because what is happening in Ukraine will set the standard for all the regimes in the future, for aggressors in the future. And we cannot allow them to leave this crime scene without accountability.
Well, with that, we'll turn it straight to you, to the audience, for a time of questions and answers. Okay? We'll just turn that off. Thank you. We'll start right here.
Thank you so much. I wanted to ask about...
And would you please tell us your name and your affiliation?
Shall we give a mic?
It'll be captured in the room. Yeah.
Daphne Saladakis with Reuters. We met with Secretary Rubio this morning. Did he say anything about what the U.S. was discussing with Russia and Ukraine, specifically on territory and any concessions that Ukraine might have to make? And if I may, on the news that senior Trump officials were discussing war plans over Signal, do you have any concerns about this, and does this raise concerns about intelligence sharing with the U.S.?
On the first one, the answer is no. He did brief us on the conversations, but I cannot release what was discussed in the meeting. It's for the U.S. side to release that to the public. We are not privileged to do that. On the signal exchanges, again, I'm sure the U.S. will sort everything out. It's, there are mistakes that are made sometimes. There are mistakes where microphones capture certain conversations, where there are, certain issues that happen. It will not affect, at least as far as Latvia is concerned, the intelligence work that we do together. But again, I wouldn't exaggerate the significance of that. We all need to make sure that we learn from certain missteps that we have, but I have no doubt US will do that.
Thanks. Sean Tanner with AFP. Can I follow up on Daphne's question? The White House put out a statement a couple of hours ago talking about the agreement against Black Sea strikes between Russia and Ukraine. How do you see the significance of this? Do you think this is important at all? Are you skeptical of the intentions? How do you see this?
Who wants to say something?
I already spoke.
Yeah, it's my turn. This is Baltic unity, actually. We can have only one person. Yeah. If we talk, yes, we had a meeting with Secretary Rubio, and he gave us as well the overview about the negotiations, and also we cannot comment that it's from U.S. side, and also with this, we're participating in these negotiations. But the main idea is actually to get a ceasefire. This is a main target right now, together with Ukraine, for U.S. President Trump, and this is something that only President Putin can give. So it's pretty clear. Will there be a full ceasefire or not? So what we see is that Putin is not very ready to have a peace, because Putin can stop it exactly the same moment when we have this press conference, but he's not willing that. So it's very important that that U.S. Together with Ukraine is pushing heavily Putin. First, to have a ceasefire. It's like precondition to negotiate the next steps of the lasting peace. So what we were discussing was actually how can we have a sustainable and lasting peace. So we are doing our part. Europe is doing the great job about investing heavily to defense. We all will do the next years at least 5% of GDP. We protect our borders. No person, no asset, no car, no vehicle can cross our borders to enter to NATO territory. So this is something what we do. So as well, we all left, we were going to leave the Ottawa Landmines Conventions. This is something very clear, that we are ready to fight for our freedom, for our common freedom. So, and we know that Putin has other goals as well. It's not about some territories in Ukraine. Putin has publicly talked about the root causes. And root causes from his mind is actually the enlargement process of the NATO, the freedom, the security in our region, about US participation as well in Europe. So we see the North Korean troops fighting in the middle of Europe. So we see that it's all connected. So if you ask the Black Sea question, step by step, of course, it is important to move towards the ceasefire. But what we see is actually Putin is asking everything else. Putin is asking his interest in the Middle East, his interest in Europe, his interest in Arctic, his interest in everywhere. So we need to understand that it's very hard work what President Trump and also Ukrainians are doing. It's really hard. But you need to know as well that Europe is acting. Europe is putting more in than ever before to defense, and also Europe is ready to be part of the sustainable peace guarantees. So that's the background. Thank you.
And can I just add, to any ceasefires, there will be quite a bit of monitoring and verification, and if necessary, attribution. So there will be quite a bit of technical elements how to implement that ceasefire. So we fully support the peace efforts and praised President Trump and Secretary Rubio and their teams for actually moving towards peace. We are at the beginning of the process, and as you would expect, the Baltic states are quite skeptical about Russia's intentions. Our intel assessments clearly shows that Russia and their instruments of power are all aligned towards war, not towards peace. So it will require quite a bit of pressure and continuous sanctions, continuous other pressure points to actually move them towards peace. And that's why the ceasefire in the Black Sea is a welcome process, but there will be elements that will need monitoring and verification.
Those are the first steps in the process, and we cannot assess yet the overall end state because we don't have it. And it's not the series of events like in a season of the games. That's the negotiation process. And we will see up and downs within those. That will depend on all the sides that are involved. And from US, we really appreciate the diplomatic efforts that need a lot of strength and power, the state power. And from what we are seeing from Russia's side, we still lack that clear interest in achieving peace, and they have to prove it. And those stages when they will have to prove it, those will be the ceasefire. It's very much needed, be it in the Black Sea, be it the infrastructure, and the most important thing, that's also the protection of the ear and the ear defense of Ukraine. Those should be the stages, but only then we will have the negotiations, the real one. And what we heard also today, the clear vision for the sustainable peace, not to be repeated after the short period, and that's in our interest. Lithuania will contribute for the peace to continue in Ukraine with our military and defense support. That is already 0.3%. Last year, 0.25 that we committed this year, and we will do it for 10 years for Ukraine. That's our contribution. We will contribute with training of Ukrainian armed forces, and of course with the economic and other assistance that is needed. And also we are ready to join the coalition of the willing to be present in Ukraine. And this is how we see the share of the burden among the allies. And we are taking our part. We are taking our part in strengthening our border with adversaries. We have no illusions about the intentions of Russia and Belarus, and we believe in strength, and we believe in strong deterrence, and we believe that we can make it. And we have the examples how it is done already with the increased defense spending up to 6% in upcoming years, and with already increased in 10 years 10 times annual spending. So these are a huge amount of money that we are ready to take on our side and in purpose for American citizens to save their money. And we will buy in the US, and as we already do, 1/5 of what we are spending. So we have all the clear examples how to achieve the security in Europe and how to achieve the peace in Ukraine.
Super. Thank you. We'll come here and then we'll move over there. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Alex Raffo, Research Institute. Given everything we just heard from all three of you, I want to get a reaction to the comments we heard from Presidential Envoy Vitkov over the weekend, did you find those comments, particularly when it comes to Ukraine's occupied territories, helpful, not helpful? What's the reflection in your countries that Putin is back on the stage and there's an impression in Ukraine that the US officials are under Russian influence? Is that your impression as well?
Which agency are you from?
Trump's agency.
I can start. I'm not going to comment one or the other person will be very happy that there will be the sustainable, lasting peace. But one can I say, this is official statement from the Estonian government. We will never recognize the change of territorial integrity using by force. Never. As US did about us. Non-recognition policy about occupations. It's clear.
And just to put this back,
The negotiations are still ongoing, and this is part of it. And we cannot take the picture and assess everything around and what will be, and draw the conclusions, what will be the outcome. As I said before, we have to see the very agreement, and then we will assess whether it is a good deal, whether it is sustainable, whether it is the just agreement. And for now, I see it as the negotiations are ongoing, and there are different phases of it and different forms of communicating.
For us, like Estonia or Lithuania, we will not ever agree to a forceful change of borders and acceptance of that. Ukrainian agency in all that is extremely important. Ukraine is the biggest country in Europe, is the biggest army currently, and a significant deterrent force of its own, a significant democratic force within the country. I mean, the parliament is continuing to work despite the war. So there is a Ukrainian-led process also, so we should not underestimate their political will or agreement. So let's not forget that.
And then just go ahead.
With just security. How crucial, I understand what you're saying, that your country is not likely to ever recognize any territory seized by force in the case of Ukraine. How important, how crucial do you think it is to that sustainable peace that the major powers around the world not recognize these territories? How crucial is that? And did you get any sense of any forward movement on resuming the project of trying to track the children, the Ukrainian children who have been abducted and taken to Russian territory?
Recognition or non-recognition policy is crucial. It's really it's like the pillar for the international law and everything what we value all together. And the best example of that is exactly we're in the right place about this museum. That U.S. non-recognition policy after the 1940 occupation, what we all had, it's something that we need to lead. It's crucial. The big countries, small countries all over the world, they will never recognize that there can be the change of the borders using military force. This is like the pillar of everything. If we now talk about the ceasefire and the peace, it's a different. We're trying, and President Trump is trying together with President Zelensky to stop killings. I assume that this night we'll see hundreds and hundreds of attacks against the civilian targets again and again. Even we all want to have peace, and Putin says that I want to have a peace as well, but I have conditions. And then these are I know lots of different conditions, but he can stop killing people right now, this night, what will come, actually starting in Ukraine after a couple of hours. It's a time difference. So we're talking about different levels, but non-recognition policy is like the pillar. So, and the second thing is actually how can we stop killings and how can we really start to negotiate about these values? So these are the part of the process.
We are looking into continuing financing the efforts tracking Ukrainian children. This is really important for us. This is the most sensitive element of all over the Russian crimes that they committed in Ukraine with Belarusian assistance, and those cases where the children are all taken to Russia, and those cases when they were indoctrinated and sent back to fight against Ukraine. This is the absolutely inhumane activity. That's why we are committed in assisting that. I cannot provide you the numbers right now. Why ceasefire? Adding a bit to what Margus said. Why ceasefire is important? It will break the most successful policy from Russia's side when they negotiated previously. Of course, they never implemented what they promised. But the very process, as it was in Minsk I, Minsk II agreement, they were intensifying the attacks during that phase, the last phases, and the biggest casualties in numbers were when just before the signatures, and remembering Debaltsevo and the other operations, that was integral part of Russia's tactics. So this time, having ceasefire and eliminating the strong instrument of Russia to put force on other side on Ukraine, that can lead us to the better results for Ukraine.
Absolutely. On tracking the stolen children, we will continue supporting that work. There's no doubt about it. Again, let's look at the wider context. It's part of the policy. It's, you occupy territories, you push those in the occupied territories to fight on front, even though that is prohibited by international conventions. That's what Russia is doing in the occupied territories. You take the children, you take the slave labor, bring it back to your country, and not to let it be taken back to their parents. You take resources out of those territories. Russia is doing that not only in the occupied territories, but also actually in Africa and other parts through the so-called Africa Corps. So there is a conscious policy on that, and we just have to be sure that we continue doing the right thing on our side. There is just no other way.
Just sorry about the second question about the children. Estonia is committed to this process already a couple of years. Our organizations and NGOs are helping together with the partners to bring back the children. But it's like a case by case. So we are talking about a couple of hundreds of children who has been brought back to their homes. But this is one thing that actually Putin can show as a goodwill, to give these children back to their families. He knows exactly where these children are, and he can show the goodwill starting from this. Yes. So would be first step if he doesn't want to have a ceasefire.
This will be our last question. Go right ahead.
Thank you. So regarding the signal incident, Vice President Vance said that the strikes on the Houthis were to bail out Europe given its reliance on the Suez Canal. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said he shared the Vice President's loathing. What do you make of this? Do you view the strikes against the Houthis as bailing out Europe? And then if there's a ceasefire, are you worried that Putin will break it and go into the Baltics and other NATO countries? Are your countries prepared for that possibility?
There are several questions in one, from what I heard. I will address the last one. The whole planning of defense and security is something that we in NATO take very seriously. The deterrence is not only capabilities and commitments, but it's also not letting opportunities take place. Because again, we saw with Russia's war against Ukraine that there was intent, there was capability and opportunity to do that. So our task is not to let that happen. So we take it very seriously. We invest in our own national defense, as you all heard, 5% of GDP. The large percentage of that goes to the US actually, and the capabilities that we buy from the US, and on top, the proportion of what US invests in that, and our proportion is about $1 to $10 that we add from our own budget. So it's a good deal for both, for the US and for us. But also, we have introduced conscription. We have specific training in schools, which is the civilian military defense training for children to understand, what are the challenges, not only in a sort of real world, but also cyber information space and others. We have civil defense courses, so there's a comprehensive defense approach in our countries, and that's the same in Finland and in other countries. So what you see, everyone on Russia's border, whether that's Norway, all NATO members, Norway, Finland, the Baltic states, Poland, Germany, we all take defense very seriously, and you saw the German decisions, which will add literally trillions of dollars to defense spending. So, we in Europe take it seriously. There are a few countries that might be spending less, but there are significant conversations taking place about that. So, and that's because the situation is what it is. And we saw it in the Cold War times. Yes, we need to spend a large percentage of our GDP on defense, because without security, there is no prosperity. So that's pretty straightforward. And I'm sure that we all will do our share.
On the strikes, what the Vice President said, was Jim pretty much bailing out Europe?
I very much answered that question, I think, that we all do our share. But when you look at the economic numbers, it's actually Europe and the US are each other's biggest investors. It's 300 billion, 400 billion on each side. It's huge. It's huge. That relationship is mega important. Biggest trade partners. Europe is the biggest space for US trade and services. And that relationship is just there. It's mutually beneficial. So it's important to be quite concrete about what needs to be done. And I think that is the role of the diplomats to sort of figure out what's the best way ahead.
Shortly, answering the first one, we appreciate U.S. strong position and moves on all the Iranian proxies in the region, Houthis as well. I want to remind you that there is also European presence in the Red Sea with our vessels, with our aircrafts that assisted the operation there. The free navigation in the Red Sea is the common good, and it's for all the global trade. It's an interest for all the countries to be there, and we see it as the form of the cooperation also in the future, and it's reducing the influence of Iran and the interference of Iran into other countries, be it Syria, or be it Lebanon, or be it the terrorist organizations, or be it Houthis. It's good for the stability and security in the region. So I wouldn't be able to divide, so who is getting more from the peace, or is it Europe or is it US? It's the common good and interest. On how we see the threats after the peace is achieved in Ukraine. I want to start with that we do not see ourselves as the small victim states standing against the big aggressor. We are planning for the deterrence. We are planning with how to defend ourselves with our forces and the forces of our allies. Alliance is the strongest organization, and in 75 years of its history, it worked, and deterrence worked. So we are planning for deterrence to be continued continually effective in the future. What it means, we have to show what we are creating for Russians. And if they're showing their forces and they will bring those back to our borders, we will show them what we have in Lithuania, at least, what we are creating in our land forces, in our air defense, and with the allies present there. And we invest a lot. And this is the effective way. So also we want to be approached from the others in the same way. It's not like this is a responsibility of some of the frontline nations. That's a responsibility of alliance to be effective. If we will be not effective, all the consequences will be all across the Europe and the globe. Even the missile won't target someone. It will target you with your job loss, with some factory being closed, with the financial collapse and the other consequences. That's why our contribution we see is the very essential, but it has to be also the shared burden for the others to increase their defenses, first of all. And this is the strong message of President Trump that has to be repeated and repeated, and from our side amplified. Spend more on defense. It's not enough. And if we see that our deterrence is shaking, it means that we are spending not enough. And that's what we are doing on our side. And the other element is, of course, the allied commitments that were ironclad for these 75 years, and we have no doubt that it will continue.
Just very shortly adding, because my ambassador says already that we need to go. First thing, Estonia has a total defense concept. It's like Israel. And whoever is going to attack Estonia will be and pay a very high price. And we're investing heavily more together with Baltics, together with our allies as a NATO member state, and also Europe is doing more. So the price will be very high for whoever is thinking to do whatever. So that's sure. The second thing is about cooperation between the Europe and US. This is like a very strong transatlantic bond. Just a good example about the defense industry. Europe will invest trillions, not hundreds of billions, but trillions of euros within the next couple of years. And I see that this is a huge opportunity for cooperation, both sides. Creating jobs, more jobs in US as well, the other way around. We need systems, we need military equipment rapidly. So this is something that we do. So I think that this kind of cooperation will be there. And if there will be a peace in Ukraine and lasting peace, it's only a good thing. But we need to guarantee that this peace must be lasting, and Europe is doing the part. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you to the Museum of the Victims of Communism for hosting us. It was a great pleasure.